I love my job. I love helping people. I love the knowledge behind it, the skill that we use, but it's just so undervalued and it's so dismissed.
Hour and 20 minutes to Manchester, but then coming home, it can take me like 3 hours to get home. So yeah, it's quite draining.
Remember Boris Johnson's promise to get Brexit done? Well, it's done all right. And the consequences are far worse than anyone imagined. From skyrocketing rents to a crumbling NHS, the UK is facing a crisis of epic proportions. In this video, we'll expose the shocking reality behind the Brexit betrayal. You'll discover how political slogans have led to devastating real-world consequences and why living in the UK has become a nightmare for millions. Prepare to have your eyes opened to the truth behind the headlines. Remember when Boris Johnson promised $350 million a week for the NHS? It was a catchy slogan plastered on the side of a red bus, capturing the hearts and minds of Brexit voters. But as we've come to learn, catchy slogans rarely translate into effective policies. The reality of the NHS post-Brexit is a far cry from the rosy picture painted by Johnson and his cohorts. The NHS, once the crown jewel of British public services, is now gasping for air. The exodus of EU workers has left gaping holes in staffing rosters, with critical shortages across the board.
Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community. Our NHS back on its feet, facing the future.
People in Britain are waking up to the fact that we have a failed state in this country.
It's not just a matter of losing a few employees here and there. We're talking about a mass exodus that has fundamentally altered the composition of our healthcare workforce. Let's look at the numbers, shall we? In 2015, a healthy 9% of NHS doctors hailed from EU countries. Fast forward to 2021, and that number has plummeted to a mere 6%. This isn't just a statistic. It represents thousands of skilled professionals who have packed their bags and left our shores. And who can blame them? The hostile environment created by Brexit has made many EU citizens feel unwelcome, even those who have dedicated their lives to caring for British patients. But surely, you might think, the government has a plan to address this crisis. Their solution? Recruit from overseas. It's a classic case of trying to plug a leak with a sieve. The very same government that pushed for stricter immigration controls now finds itself desperately trying to attract foreign workers. The irony would be laughable if the consequences weren't so dire. And what about that promised $350 million a week?
Is now being stepped up to make 2020 a year of prosperity and growth and hope, and to deliver a parliament that works for the people.
Job as the government, my job, is to bring this country together now and take us.
It seems to have vanished into thin air, much like the credibility of those who made the promise. In reality, NHS funding has barely kept pace with inflation, let alone the increased demands placed on the service. Waiting times for treatments have skyrocketed, leaving patients in pain and distress. It's a far cry from the world-class healthcare system we were promised. The impact on NHS workers has been equally devastating. In October 2024, after nationwide strikes and protests, NHS staff received a 5.5% pay increase. But let's be clear, this was too little, too late. After enduring the immense pressures of the pandemic, risking their lives to save others, this meager increase felt like a slap in the face to many healthcare workers. While NHS workers struggle with meager pay increases, another Brexit promise is crumbling before our eyes. Remember the economic boom we were promised?
At this level of growth, it's unsustainable for this country. And we should be shocked by this. We should be really worried too.
43% of people asked thought that immigration has a negative impact on British.
It turns out, the only thing booming is the sound of businesses fleeing the UK. The harsh reality is that Brexit, far from ushering in a new era of prosperity, has left Britain's economy adrift and struggling. Let's look at the cold, hard facts. Since 2016, the UK's GDP growth has consistently underperformed compared to the EU average, but it gets worse. In 2022, while other nations were bouncing back from the pandemic, the UK stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was the only G7 economy to shrink. So much for that global Britain vision we were sold. And what about those amazing trade deals we were promised? The ones that were supposed to make us an economic powerhouse? Well, they're either non-existent or pale imitations of what we had as EU members. The government's post-Brexit trade deals have been widely criticised as inferior to the agreements we had before.
Secure borders, safer streets, everyone treated with dignity and respect at work.
Well, thinking of making this journey, one, it is very hazardous. You may think the weather looks great, but it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. And the second thing is we will send you back.
It's like we've traded in a Ferrari for a rusty bicycle and are being told to celebrate our newfound freedom of movement. But surely, all this economic turmoil must be offset by the flood of foreign investment we were promised, right? Wrong. Post-Brexit, the UK has seen a significant decline in foreign investment. Many businesses are hesitant to commit due to the uncertainty surrounding trade agreements and market access. It's as if we've hung up a closed for business sign at our borders. The Brexit campaigners promised us economic freedom and prosperity. Instead, we've been handed rising inflation and stagnation.
Space systems tend to be a bit more government-led because the government decides, what points are accorded to each different attribute.
The gap between the sacrifices made by people and the service they receive from politicians grows this big. It leads to a weariness in the heart of a nation.
It's like being promised a 5-star holiday and ending up in a rundown motel with a leaky roof. The UK's economic performance has contradicted every rosy prediction made by the Brexit cheerleaders. But wait, there's more. The Institute for Government has noted that the UK's productivity levels have become a pressing concern, lagging behind other G7 countries. This poses significant challenges for economic growth. It's as if we're trying to run a marathon with our shoelaces tied together, while our competitors sprint ahead. Expert opinions suggest that the long-term economic impact of Brexit will likely result in increased trade barriers, reduced foreign investment, and a potential decline in the UK's global economic standing.
Shock from energy prices this year will be larger than any single year in the 1970s.
London have again taken centre stage as it's revealed that knife and gun crime offences leapt by 20% last year.
It's a grim forecast that makes one wonder, was this the taking back control we were promised? As the dust settles on the Brexit saga, public sentiment towards political promises has taken a nosedive. Voters, once swayed by grand visions and catchy slogans, now view new commitments with a healthy dose of skepticism. Can you blame them? The Brexit betrayal has left deep scars, affecting every aspect of life in the UK. From a crumbling NHS to a floundering economy, the promises of 2016 have proven to be nothing more than empty rhetoric.
Has also made us all poorer too.
It's really bad, mate. I need to walk about one of these, man, look. It's what you need to walk about to keep yourself safe.
Larger than any single year in the 1970s, but actually he might be understating it.
But here's the million-pound question. Will Keir Starmer's 5 missions be any different? Or are they just another set of hollow promises waiting to be broken? The UK stands at a crossroads, and it's time for voters to demand more than catchy slogans and empty promises. After all, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Well, you know how it goes. The future of the nation depends on a populace that can see through the political smoke and mirrors, demanding concrete action rather than flowery words. It's time to hold our leaders' feet to the fire and make them deliver on their grand promises. The stakes have never been higher.